So one of the things that I'd like to break down, if I could, for a large show, and obviously this may change for a different size show, but what are the specific things that you are collecting, advancing from the artists?
So all the things that I include in the events, is that,
Sure.
So it depends on the event, because there's some where I do, a little bit of everything, and there's some where I'm only doing one specific part. But usually with artist relations, for me, I'm covering transportation, hospitality, hotels, either if I'm booking or just making recommendations with discounts, things like that. Dressing rooms and what's available versus what they need. I try to get them set times and contacts for production. I try to keep usually production advances separate from artist relations, but at the same time knowing that they work in tandem. So I'll provide contacts for production, but don't necessarily CC them, because our production team is already, getting a million emails. They don't necessarily want to know about what type of milk they're getting. So I think those are the majority. Oh, and guest list are probably, the main components of it.
Cool. Anna, anything else that you would add to that list?
Yeah, I think Alex nailed it, but like pred numbers and catering numbers are the most important, because those are things that we have to pay for. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah. Catering needs to know, and I usually, my whole advance will be around actually that catering deadline. Credentials, we order enough in most cases. You're going to have their creds, and we need that info, but like the catering numbers are important to give them an estimate of what we're going to be doing per day. And then of course we always pad it a little bit, because you never know what's going to happen. And then the number of vehicles that they're trying to bring in is very important as well. And nowadays, and Chris, we spoke on this a little bit, but security, like connecting them with security and making sure that they have the security contact. And if there's someone dedicated just to their stage area or backstage, and I'm able to do that intro, especially with my headliners, I want to make that intro as soon as possible so that they can start their communication and understand what our security protocols are for our event.
That's awesome. And Mark, how is that similar or different in your world with these, high-end speakers and things of that nature?
Yeah, it's very similar for sure. I think, I once before, I think I sent you a long list of all the different asks that we have for this thing, and it ended up being almost like 2 pages long for these events, because we try to handle every aspect of it. A lot of this information that you're asking from them is, in a sense, private and confidential. So you got to be very careful about that, especially when it comes to travel, when it comes to contracts, getting all their legal names, what entity you have to put the contract under. And then I think the biggest challenges, besides just getting all their assets, the bios and the headshots, it's just who are all the right people you need to talk to. I think Anna talked about, a lot of times they'll CC everybody on an email and you have no idea who's who. So just trying to find out who is the right person that you need to talk to, whether it's about publicity, it's their point of contact for the day of, the tour manager, who's handling all travel, or we're basically handling the travel. And a lot of times also at the events, the talent needs to be doing other things besides whether performing or speaking. They have sponsored obligations on site. They need to do appearances, meet and greets, and things along those lines. So managing all that aspects of it. So it's just, you basically need a lot from them. And then, as he goes back to before, having that Google Drive to manage all that different content and all the different assets there is ideal.
Awesome.
And one part that I had to add this past year, which I think most of us have had to, is the COVID elements. What the festival's specific procedures are and what documents we may need ahead of time, letting them know what our safety practices are for our staff and what the patrons are doing, and just, what we need from them in advance for that.
That was pretty crucial for us too. Exactly. Making sure that they needed to be either vaccinated or have their tests ahead of time and getting that on site.
Got it. And I'm sure that obviously changes depending on where you're at, but where the festival's at and jurisdiction and all that stuff. Are there particular items that tend to create more friction or harder to track down, or just require more communication Of that list of things that you guys are advancing, is there one you're always like, all right, I got to dig into this and make sure I'm really kind of following up and make sure I'm communicating as clearly as possible? Or is it all the same?
Well, Mark probably knows more about this than me even, but I feel like production and everything that they need to go into talking with the stage manager and the production manager, that's out of my world. I can help with the beginning process of it, but they really have to get on the phone and go through a lot of stuff. Like that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I mean, that takes up quite a bit of it, because a lot of things that we work with the music side, but then we also deal with speakers and talk side of things. So we're dealing with almost two opposite production teams, and we're also dealing with editorial teams and producers and things along those lines. So there's a lot of back and forth going on between talent's management and the production side.
And it's kind of a domino effect. Until they know what's happening with production, they may not know or have answers for artist relations. So until they know what time sound check is or load in or whatever it is, we won't know what transportation needs they have. And then even with catering and hospitality, if they're coming in earlier, do we also have to provide breakfast, that sort of thing. So it's all connected like that.
Got it.
I mean, it's an interesting point that you brought up there, because a lot of these things you can plan months in advance, but everything comes down to like the 48 hours or 24 hours or even, few hours before the door opens. So everything's in constant change and flow, and you're changing car service, you're changing what time they need to be on site or what time the set times are constantly. So you need to have that communication with all your teams and then also with the artists about that.
But that's why music industry professionals are the best. Like, we should do everything because like we have to change on a dime, and that's what we're teaching to, interns and the younger generation and like all of our staff, and it just keeps flowing, So anyway, it takes a talented group of people to do that. Like, not to toot our own horns, but
So the things are obviously always changing. What you're collecting might be different depending on the size and type of event. But what about the core structure of the advance? Does that change? Is it the same? What's your guys' thoughts on that? Alex, why don't you go?
I typically keep it relatively the same. I've kind of built a structure over the years based off experience, and then just kind of tweak it based on the event. So if it's an email template or a grid that I usually use, the reason I use it is because it gets the job done and it's a fail safe. And even when I'm sleep deprived and my head's not all there, I can always go back and reference that because I can trust the systems that I've built. And because of that, I try and keep it, in the same general wheelhouse. And then, like we said, just kind of tweaking it based on the event and its needs.
Anna, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. And I also want my advanced form that they're filling out to present itself in a grid that makes sense to me. So I know I can change it around after the fact, but I want it to already be that way. So of course I want their name first and their date of play and what stage they're on. Like, I have a couple things that I know I want to have very first so that anyone can open up my grid, their responses that they've filled out. And it's a pretty easy flow of information that makes sense from what, we would need right off the bat, and then into their more specifics, like catering numbers and those kind of things.
Sure.
I also like to include, I do a tier system, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more with hospitality, but I like to always ask for their 5 must-have hospitality items, even if they're a headliner, because at least then I know what is the most important thing to you. The tour manager knows what is the most important thing. If you could list 5 things out of that rider, if you only could get 5 things, we'll probably give you more. But if you could only get 5, what would that be? I like to include that too.